Welcome to the Sports Living with Coach Biven podcast. I want to thank all my sponsors, Biven Grounds Crew, Ellis Baseball Academy Performance, Extreme Concrete Cutting, Kentucky Select Properties, Gum Heating and Cooling, Played Again Sports St. Matthews, the Scroggin team at Remax, Shrink Personal Training, Sorg Sport and Wellness, Striegel Family Dentistry, True Officials, Went Family Wealth Management. Again, thank you to all my sponsors. Hey guys, welcome to the show. First ever interview podcast. Chris Burke has graciously came on with me and is going to get me through this. And Chris, I appreciate you coming on the show and being my first ever guest on U Sports.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Let's do it. U Sports, that's my sweet spot. So let's get rolling.
It definitely is. And you've been through it all. You've played the U Sports, high school, college at the highest level, pro ball at the highest level. And I want you just to help some athletes listening, some youth parents listening, and some youth coaches out there hopefully listening to try to navigate this crazy world of U Sports. So we're going to jump right in it and go through your timeline of U Sports and then get in, obviously, some pro ball and some broadcasting as well. You even have a podcast that I just found out last night that you run your own podcast. So that's pretty cool. And that's Coach Me Up podcast. So that's pretty cool. I listened to a few episodes last night. And,
nice. Yeah.
One other thing that I want to say up front is Chris is not afraid to talk about his faith. And I think that's an awesome thing. Some people are a little shy of that, but I really appreciate you doing that. It helps me and helps others out there, I think.
Thank you, brother.
So youth sports days, I think it was over in St. Matthews, but I'm not even going to guess. So what'd you play growing up?
Yeah. I actually started my youth sports days at Germantown Little League before mom and dad moved from the St. X Germantown part of Louisville out to the east part of town. So then I played youth football before I started playing school ball at Linden. And then I played Little League baseball at St. Matthews, and then, school ball. And life was simpler then. I tell the kids all the time, like, life was so much simpler then, especially as it pertains to high school. I joke with my dad all the time, like, did you ever wonder how I was going to fit in at St. X when you sent me to St. X? He looked at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, did you have any clue about who was there and what kids were ahead of me? And like, he looked at me like that might be the dumbest question I've ever heard. And I knew he was going to answer it that way. And we'll talk a lot about, I think, some of the intentional and maybe even somewhat unintentional wisdom of my parents through my upbringing. But life was so much simpler then. The world was very big. You didn't know anybody, right? You just knew your little league, and you maybe played all-stars, but everybody from your little league would go to their area schools, unless they went to a private school maybe. But even back then, it was not as normal maybe to seek out a private high school, right? And everybody in the other little leagues went to, our big rival in Little League was Valley Sports. Well, all those kids went to PRP. That's where they lived. They went to Butler or PRP. That's where they lived. My dad sent me to St. X with no thought of when I would play on a varsity team or if I would play on that's where they wanted me to go to high school, and I was successful as a youth athlete, and my dad and mom definitely encouraged me. I was the youngest of three. My brother was a good athlete too. My sister was athletic, but didn't necessarily play competitive sports all that long. But I just think the world was simpler, and in a lot of ways, the ignorance is bliss piece, where you're not so worried about, I think, the high end of achievement in sports at such a young age. And I look at that with my kids, and I just think, like, and I wish the world was a little more innocent as far as that's concerned, the way it was then now.
Definitely. You didn't know the Valley Sports kids until they were on the field.
No.
nowadays,
They're all
social
buddies. Yeah,
media,
they all follow each
and
other. Yeah,
this
no doubt.
it's a wild
Or
the
maybe they
bling and the
play,
drip.
or
They
maybe
get
they
into
play together because obviously the travel organizations have narrowed the funnel so much that now we didn't play with kids really from other parts of town until we were in high school. You'd play summer ball, whether it was Legion or travel teams were just starting to happen when I was in high school.
Yep,
But you would never be on the field as teammates with kids from other parts of town. And again, to me, there's some beauty in that. Um, I was laughing. I still play a ton of basketball. I was laughing with some of the guys I play basketball with. I didn't play basketball against black athletes until high school. I
yeah,
I didn't.
yep. Same
My
here.
son started playing basketball, AU basketball tournaments in third grade, and so
Yep,
he
yep,
got exposed to a much more diverse level of competition at a much earlier age. So there's that part to me is a great thing, and playing on teams with people from
absolutely.
different parts of town and different backgrounds. But the downside of it is, I think we've uh, the trickle down of professional sports and college sports has certainly made its way into high school and youth sports, and some people might consider this hypocritical for me to say, but in a way, I'm it gets really serious really soon. And as somebody that makes their living calling amateur sports and doing a lot of youth instruction, again, that some people might argue that sounds hypocritical, but um, it's just an observation. Again, I'm not
Yeah,
passing judgment one
but
way or the other. It's just an observation.
I do remember my dad taking me in 1989 to youth, hitting lessons. So all that was around. But like you're saying, exactly what you're saying is this: the new world is a wild world. Just people playing for a Tennessee team that live in the state of Indiana at 12U baseball. Like, it's just, as
Yeah,
I mean, volleyball,
yeah,
you name it,
that's right.
club
That's right.
volleyball.
It's,
It's
it's all
out there.
sports all the
It's out
time.
there.
Yeah.
How about a coach? Did your dad coach you, or any of the coaches from youth sports that you still talk to or remember? Quick little story.
Yeah, my dad coached my brother and I quite a bit. He was usually not the head coach just because of his work schedule, but he was certainly around. And what I would say, um, there were a lot of other coaches that really impacted me, especially high school coaches. Joe Bergamini was a big influence on my life, my high school basketball coach. But what I would say to the coaches out there that are dads, there's a lot of conversation right now around the car ride. And to me, I had a conversation with a former teammate the other day about this. To me, the best time to influence your youngsters is the car ride. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some times where the car ride can be a little silent and maybe you let something lay that was rough, but kids have such a short memory. It's which I love about kids. They can forget things so quickly. Usually, it's us adults that are messing them up because stuff stings and we take things personal. Kids move on so quick, but because they move on
Right.
so quick, if you don't use the car ride to point some things out, sometimes you miss the moment. And so, one of the things I think back to my upbringing that I'm very grateful for is, since my dad was a coach in high school and a coach in college, he coached at St. X in Bellarmine. When he coached my teams, we spent the car ride. Yes, we talked about how I played and what I did well and what I messed up and how I could have done better and those kinds of things. But oftentimes our conversation was around our team. And man, Josh played good today. Have you seen how much better Josh has gotten? Josh is really starting to get it. Remember last practice when I told Josh, like, hey man, you got to be more selective early in the count. Did you see him like get a 1-0 fastball and hit that line drive in the left? That was his best swing. Or we talk about the shortstop on the other team. My dad's like, hey, how I keep telling you, like when you go out for a relay throw, you got to anticipate throwing the ball home, not turn around and wait for the play to happen, but anticipate. Did you see how he threw our guy out at home? Like, that's what I'm talking to you about. That's what I keep trying to get you to do. And so I say that to say, like, I think it's very helpful. There's a lot of youth psychologists out there say, oh, just ask the kid if they had fun. And if they say yes, great. Take them to get a milkshake. Like, okay. I just, that was not the story of my upbringing. It's certainly not the story of the Burke rides home. We try to
Right.
talk about the whole game, uh, the whole team, and I think it helps. It certainly helped me see the game in a much broader lens, and not just I play good, so I'm happy, or I played bad, so I'm sad. It was a much fuller and I think much more complete experience when. Plus, I think some of the teaching, like, hey man, your body language stunk today after you struck out. Like, I don't, I'm not going to stand for that, you know. Whereas 2 days
Right.
later, or if we just let that slide, like sometimes it misses its poignance, if that makes sense.
Got it.
What
Before
was the
moving on
Vivint car?
to
I
the
want to know
high
what the
school,
Vivint car ride home was like.
uh, my dad helped coach because at Beach Month they
Yeah.
needed coaches. I did a practice podcast with
Okay.
him yesterday, and he talked about that. And once 10U hit, he said he had no clue, and
But
there
what
was
about
better
with your
coaches
boys? I
coming
want to know
along,
what it
so
was like with your
he
boys.
stepped back.
What about your boys
Uh,
driving home?
I never, and I now have a TikTok account, and I'm doing youth sports on that. So one of my minute posts was the old car ride home in the
Hmm.
negative way. But like you're saying, we did discuss little things in the game, like you're exactly what you're saying. But body language was something that we discussed. But the missed ground ball between your legs, you were in the proper spot. We didn't ever get angry on that. You see these parents just ripping some kids for making a physical mistake nowadays, and it's like
Yeah, sometimes.
he
Yeah,
was
sometimes you
trying,
catch it,
so.
sometimes you don't. Yeah.
But yeah, no, they always played hard. I coached them hard. I coached them through eighth grade basketball, and Tucker can tell you this. He took the brunt of some of the tough timeouts because he was the
Sure.
point guard and he was
Best
the
player.
leader,
Yeah.
and I was assistant coach for Cooper's team, so he didn't have as much as me up inning. But baseball wise, we had a great time, as you know, and we'll discuss some of that later in some of the topics. But it
Yeah,
was fun.
I think
I'm
sometimes
out of
parents are
coaching.
so scared to say something wrong. By the same token, like, you're their parent, and I said to my buddy the other day, youth sports, it's gotten so big and bloated. So at some level, like as a parent, you're like, okay, well, we're spending time and money doing this. Here's my expectations, and like you said, it's not I expect you to catch every ground ball and hit a rocket every time at bat. Those aren't the expectations, but I do expect you to be coachable. I expect you to play in a manner worthy of respect and admiration by your coaches and teammates. I expect you to handle adversity well, and when you don't, we're going to talk about it, right? Like, again, you can't ask a 9-year-old to always handle adversity great, but when you don't, we're going to talk about it. So I just think sometimes we're so worried about offending our kids, and I'm like, well, they're our kids. Like, we have to parent them. So
Yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
if we don't parent them, like, who's going to? Because most youth coaches are scared to death to get on other people's kids. So if you don't get on your own kids, like, how are they
Absolutely.
going to learn? So anyway, there's a balance there.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's always easy or simple, but I do think one of the things I'm grateful for my dad and the coaching experience of my youth sports with him was our car rides home were very full and very fruitful.
That's awesome. It's good knowledge for the parents out there. And the last question before going to high school is because in high school most kids kind of do specialize at that point because guess what? They can't make the football team because they're not as good at that as they are in baseball. So they're on the baseball team only. But I guess to the parents out there that get that sixth grade club volleyball coach come up to them and tell them their daughter needs to play this club volleyball and school volleyball only with no basketball in the fall because we're doing club volleyball. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I would caution against that. I think the fullness of the youth sports experience is different teammates, different coaches, different competitive environments. Um, Also, think it's you know there's a fine line between people saying play multiple sports and constantly being involved in multiple sports. So again, I'm not saying we have all the answers in the Burke house, but my oldest two boys, I've got 5 children, a daughter and 4 boys. And my daughter just plays field hockey, and she only plays field hockey in field hockey season. And she has no aspirations to play in college, so that's great. She plays school field hockey, and it's awesome. She she gets in when she gets in. Some games she doesn't, and we go and cheer and talk about the team and the game, and it's great. My oldest 2 boys are very talented. They play all three of the major sports: basketball, baseball, and football. And we do our best in my ninth grader. It's obviously getting a little messy, but all the way up until high school, we try to do our best to just play each sport in season. So, again, not saying I have all the right answers, but we would do our best. There would always be what I call dual months. So, like February, you'd be wrapping up basketball and entering into
Yeah.
baseball, and July, you'd be wrapping up baseball and entering into football, and October or November, you'd be wrapping up football and entering into basketball. So you'd have these kind of crossover months, but for the most part, they played each sport in each season. They have played each sport in each season. And uh, so I think that even though it's like, wow, these kids play all 3 sports, they're really never double dipping. So that made life at least a
Right.
little simpler. But I think the fullness of that experience has given them a lot of neat relationships, a lot of different challenges mentally. Baseball is a very mentally taxing sport. Football is a physically demanding sport. Basketball challenges your toughness and your grit and your will and your want to, and in some regards your cardiovascular shape more than the other sports. And so there's a fullness to that. By the same token, not every kid loves every sport. Not every kid's passionate about every sport. So I don't want it to make it sound like that's the only way to do it. But I do
Right.
think that pre-high school kids should feel completely at ease compartmentalizing each season and not feeling like they have to do something year round.
Totally agree. Now let's move on to the high school. You did play multiple sports at St. Xavier High School, and just maybe a little bit about those sports and maybe a couple of the coaches there that influenced you to do some coaching that you
Yeah,
do today.
so I played basketball and baseball at St. X. I started playing football, and my heart just wasn't quite in it, and I don't think I was ever gonna. I wanted to play quarterback. I don't think they were gonna let me play quarterback and miss most of the summer playing baseball. So when I showed up a couple weeks late to freshman practice, and they had me running with the third team and told me they were going to move me to defensive back, I was like, I think I'll just play basketball and baseball. And I think my dad was actually happy about that. Um, so anyway, my high school basketball experience, I still play a ton of basketball today, and basketball has been a huge piece of my life. I always like to say I was an athlete that played baseball. I wasn't a baseball player,
Right.
but um, I love the game of baseball. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate the nuances of the sport just as much as I do basketball and football. But I think basketball was a passion of mine at a very young age. Fortunately, my dad made sure I realized that my ceiling was higher in baseball than basketball, and so I ended up focusing there. In the summertime, I didn't play travel basketball.
Gotcha.
I just played, and that's really where you kind of decide what you want to do in college is the summer. You can play all 3 sports during the high school season, but in the summer you kind of have to get out there and be seen and play against the best of the best in whatever sport you're trying to play in college. So for me, that was certainly baseball in the summertime. But my high school basketball coach, Joe Bergamini, was a huge influence on me. I just thought he was really gifted at embodying the characteristics and the traits that he called us to. So, he told us to respect the officials, and I remember he used to call them sir, and always took a pretty non-threatening posture with them. Not that he got along with every referee all the time, but he used to not let us lie about our height and weight in the program, which is hilarious. As you know, in
All right.
basketball, like
Yeah.
nobody's their program height in basketball, so we would always laugh about the scouting report on the chalkboard before the game. It would every team on the chalkboard would feel like they were 4 inches taller than us at every spot. And then we'd go out there and we'd be like, wait, these dudes are our size, but everybody lies in
Yeah.
basketball media guides. And he was just really, he started me as a sophomore, which was a big responsibility at point guard at a place like St. X. And he was hard on me, but in a very fair way. And so
Gotcha.
I'm very grateful for him as my high school baseball coach. And then Joe White was high school basketball coach. Joe White was my high school baseball coach, and he was not nearly as hard on me or as into the finer points of coaching me but he was fantastic at giving me freedom to play. So I was a base stealer, and he just gave me the green. I had the emerald green light to go whenever I wanted to. And so I was grateful
Yep.
to play for a coach that just gave me the freedom to play my style of play. And so there was a lot of assistant coaches. Andy Porta was my actually assistant basketball coach, who's now the head baseball coach at St. X. But
Yep.
he had a blue collar and a toughness about him that I think impacted everybody he's coached. And so my high school sports experience was fantastic, and certainly helped me achieve, I think, at Tennessee, because the St. X experience was so competitive, but also blue collar in a way that I think really gave me an advantage when I moved on from there.
Gotcha. Perfect lead in for me. You're the pro at this, so you're leading right into the college world. And before you got there, though, you were a high school baseball player at St. X. When did you know you were going to play in college, or also with the recruiting process back in 1996,
Yeah.
7, 8,
I think
somewhere around
early
there?
on, my dad, having been a college baseball coach, early on, my dad gave me a lot of confidence in a very down to earth way, in a you're the greatest of all time way. He coached me very hard and certainly never made me feel like I had arrived or I was better than anybody else. But he also was had a gifting to give me confidence that he thought I was a pretty good player. And I believed him because I knew he knew what a pretty good player looked like. And so I always felt like I was going to be able to play in college. It was really the summer after my sophomore year. So I started at shortstop as a sophomore at St. X. And I knew that was kind of a big deal. But you don't know that doesn't guarantee you're going to play in college. But that summer we had a travel team called Louisville Thunder. And the Louisville Thunder back in the day, now you have 15U, 16U, 17U, 18U, whatever. Back then it was just an 18U team, meaning anybody 18 years or younger could play. So we had
Right.
16 to 18, really the best 16 to 18-year-olds all over the city were on that one team. And I was our shortstop. And about the middle of the summer, and it was kind of a neat summer too, because my brother was still 18 years old, but he had just got done with his freshman year of college, but he was a young freshman in college. So he and I got to play together that year. And so he
That's
and I
cool.
were facing the same pitchers. And I was like, man, I'm doing pretty good against the same guys he's doing pretty good against, and by the end of the summer, I was hitting leadoff, and I don't know if I led our team in hitting but I was close to it. And I remember thinking, some of the guys that we would face, guys in our dugout, this guy's nasty. And I remember thinking, like, I don't think this guy's very good. Like, this ball is moving kind of slow to me. So I started to really get that feeling that year. And then the next summer and the next high school season, I kind of took off. And at that point, I went to some showcases. That's where the recruiting process started. But I think by the summer of my sophomore year, I had a pretty good feeling that I thought that I was going to be able to play major college baseball. But it doesn't matter what you think until somebody recruits you and
That's
offers you a
right.
scholarship. But fortunately, a year later, that all started to unfold.
And it does seem nowadays that it's a whole different ball game with this portal in college baseball. And again, I want to thank you for your time. You're getting ready to head into the college baseball world, starting up. Division I starts February 14th, so I know I'm pretty sure you're going to be on the tube doing some games here soon. So, but that portal, that NIL, it seems to be a different landscape. And I guess I'm going to go to the point of the kid is a Division I baseball player, volleyball player, basketball player. But now with this portal and NIL, and they are a mid-level Division One, I guess I should say. They're not the top 100 in the nation by Perfect Game
Mhm.
USA, and they're not Prep Baseball Report top 10 in
Mhm.
their state. They're that middle line guy. Is the D2, is the NAIA, is the JUCO route possibly the better route for some of these kids to get in the game earlier now that you can almost transfer up a level, almost like minor league
Yeah,
baseball?
I think it's a very confusing time right now in the world of recruiting. Uh, in some regards, it's easier to get to the top. It just might take you longer. So back in the day, Josh, like back in the day, you got recruited and that's where you went to school. And you spent 4 years there and then it was over. You know, not to say there weren't transfers, but it didn't happen very much. Now, uh, if you're under recruited, which is going to happen more and more because most of the high end big schools are going to be doing a lot of their recruiting out of the portal. If you're under recruited, you can go to JUCO or NAIA or Division two and start your college career at that level and still end up at the top of the sport in major college athletics, regardless of the sport. So, um, you know, again, without passing judgment on the current landscape, it is what it is. And so I think what the kid has to decide is, am I in it for the long haul of development? And am I okay with just keeping my nose down, going to a place where I think I can get better and be coached and develop and then see where that takes me? Or do I really just want to go to some big fancy place? And if I can't, then I'll just go to college and be a kid. And I'm, again, trying not to pass judgment on that, but it, it can be frustrating that it feels like the recruiting process is harder than ever to get noticed by the big schools because they can utilize the portal. I get that. By the same token, um, there's a lot of different paths to the top. We see it all the time. We see it all the time. And I would just encourage, and again, I have a ninth grader, so I'm telling my son this all the time. Like, it's not a race to be the best 16-year-old or the best 18-year-old. First of all, you got to get through puberty. You got to see where your body falls. You got to see where your skill set matches up with your peers. And then you have to decide, not me as dad, you have to decide how much do you want to do this and how much are you willing to work at it. And um, if that means going to a smaller school to start to see if you're actually better than that level, because at some point we're like, oh, I don't want to go to Division two. Well, if you want to play in Division one and you go to Division two and kill it, I mean, I
Yep.
called it, as you
Yep.
said, I called the sport at its highest level of college baseball. There are Division two and Division three transfers all over the sport. I mean, your son plays at Louisville, you know it as well as I do. Kids that started out at small schools and have worked their way up. So there are many pathways, but sometimes they're not uh, as fancy or as shiny
Right.
as kids would like them, and so then they have to make decisions.
Yep. So social media again does that. They'll commit early, and then all of a sudden they make it a fall on campus, or they don't even make it to campus. That's just one of those things with social media nowadays that kind of irks me. But when you got to Tennessee, your first 2 years you played, I know that. I want to hear about those and the experience of being that freshman on a big time campus like Tennessee.
Yeah, my college experience, I like to tell people all the time, like Coach Delmonico was not a perfect coach, but he was the perfect coach for me. He identified me early in the recruiting process as a player that fit his style, which was very aggressive on the bases, and so he invested a big scholarship in me. People, I was it came down between Tennessee, Notre Dame, and Kentucky. Uh, and I almost went to Notre Dame, and I just decided it was too cold to go play baseball in South Bend, Indiana. And
Yeah.
the brothers at St. X did not like that. But um, it turned out to be a perfect time for me to go to Tennessee because they were coming off the back years of the Helton era where they were, if you look at the SEC in 93, 94, 95, 96, Tennessee was right behind LSU right there with Alabama as the number 2, number 3 program in the SEC there for a 4 or 5 year stretch. And then 97, they made the tournament, got beat. In 98, the year before I got there, they didn't make the tournament. Um, and so my freshman year in 99, they were kind of rebuilding. And so he decided to run 3 or 4 of us out there and let us grow up. And so I got a ton of experience in 99 and 2000 along with my teammates. And we did not make the tournament either one of those years. So coming into 2001, coach hadn't made the tournament in 3 years. It was getting a little dicey around town. The pressure wasn't quite as immense as it is in today's sport, but you could feel the whispers that people were wondering if Coach Delmonico was gonna make it, but he had the wisdom to play young and to allow us to grow up. And by the time we got to 2001, we had basically learned every way to lose, and we decided, hey, let's win a few of these
Yeah.
close games because so many of those games come down to the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. And anyway, we had a great year. We finished. We made it to the national semifinal, finished tied for 3rd at the College World Series, and um, I had a very special season that was a culmination of just a ton of experience and the opportunity to get to play and start all 3 years. And so it's just a really neat college experience, one that I literally couldn't put a price tag on. And just very grateful for Larry Simcox and Rod Delmonico and the way they coached me, because while I was a very successful player there and the system was perfect for my style of play, they still coached me really hard. Larry worked really hard with me on my infield play and my ability to hit the ball to the opposite field. And Coach DeMonico challenged me to lead and to uh, call my teammates higher. And he gave me the freedom to make a bunch of mistakes on the bases until I figured it out. And he challenged me to get more out of my swing when he felt like I wasn't uh, hitting for as much power as I could, which I think was pretty risky for a guy that batted leadoff. But uh, turned out to be a huge uh, stepping stone in my career. And so, very, very grateful to have gone to Tennessee. My teammates, the experiences, the university, the everything that I love about the University of Tennessee, but also, uh, just I had the good fortune to play for. And even Randy Mazey, our pitching coach, even though I wasn't a pitcher, like that coaching staff at Tennessee really, really impacted me. I got a lot better because of that staff.
And you moved second base to shortstop your
Hmm.
junior year, so you didn't sit over there in the corner and cry. You were obviously playing the game your
Yeah,
freshman sophomore year. But some of these guys nowadays, if they're not playing the position, I'll just leave and go somewhere else. But I'm glad to hear that, and I obviously seen that you moved from second to short your junior year. You go to the World Series. You're on the College World Series All Tournament team. You're the SEC Player of the Year. Uh, I want to hear about this award that you were a finalist for, and I'm guessing the Rotary Smith Award. Was that like the best college baseball
yeah,
player back
yeah.
in
The
the day,
Golden
or
Spikes and the Golden Spikes was a little bit. I don't know that they went all the way through the levels that they do today, but yeah, the Golden Spikes, the Rotary Smith Award, and there was one other one. What was the third one? Anyway, I was runner up to Mark Pryor and all those. So, Mark, I never
wow?
forget. I was
Okay,
having
yeah,
this great
yeah,
year, and you can do the whole pitcher position player debate all you want, but Baseball America, like the week of the regionals or the week of the World Series, I can't remember. They were going to announce the player of the year in a couple weeks. And Baseball America had Mark Pryor, back in the day when magazines were a big deal. They put Mark Pryor on the cover of
yeah,
Baseball America, and it said the greatest college pitcher ever. And I remember telling my dad, "Hey dad, I don't think I'm going to win player of the year."
yeah. He was, and
I think he's got it. But just to be the SEC player of the year was super cool. And the culmination of 3 years of just getting better. And you talked about it. I tell this story all the time, and I'm so grateful for my parents and the upbringing that they gave me. But when Tennessee did everything right in recruiting me, but but when back in the day, you talk about the world being a big place and not knowing, you know kids from other parts of the state or the country or whatever. Like, the only way you even knew who was in your recruiting class was a press release. That was it, like a piece of paper.
right,
So on the piece of paper, I was listed as a shortstop, and there was a couple other kids that were listed as infield, outfield. And it's not normal. I mean, it's not abnormal for schools to have 3 or 4 kids that are listed at shortstop. We all know, schools
Right.
tend to recruit shortstops and center fielders, right? But to my knowledge, I was the only shortstop in the recruiting class. Well, I kid you not, this is how crazy the world was. I show up, we're moving into my dorm, and kid in my dorm, his name's Stevie Daniel, said, "Hey, Stevie, nice to meet you. I'm Chris. What position you play?" He says, "I play shortstop." "What position you play?" I said, "I play shortstop." "Well, good to meet you." I looked at my dad, and he looked at me. We kind of fish-eyed each other. And Stevie played shortstop our first 2 years, and I played second base. And then my junior year, they switched us. But when I tell you, my dad never once said they lied to you. I can't believe there's another shortstop here. They never told us. Like these guys, he never ever brought it back up, other than just say, "Hey, what's going on at practice? Are you playing short or are you playing second?" Like they got me at second base. Okay, that was it.
Yep,
That was it.
absolutely. I get that with Tucker. Why isn't he starting? My answer: I'm not the coach. He plays for the University
They
of
think he
Louisville.
should pitch in a
They
bullpen.
coach
Yeah,
him.
that's right. Good for
You
you,
know,
man.
I
Good for
mean,
you.
that's that's on
Mhm.
them. And I'm excited for that season. I know you're excited for
Yeah.
college baseball, and we're
Yeah.
here. So flying out to Texas on the 13th. So ready to roll.
Excited to watch your boy pitch this
Let's.
year.
He's ready. He's excited. He's wanting to do what you did your first 2 years that you didn't into the third year that you did. So that's his goal, and that's the team's goal. So uh, going into the professional baseball now, you get drafted in the first round. Obviously, you had all the accolades to get this to happen. You were the player out there that was going to have a first round draft pick happen to you. So you do that. I guess, the kind of same thing. The 2 years at Tennessee, first 2 years, you were learning the system. Well, now you're a minor leaguer and you're learning the system, but it didn't take long. It was what, 2.5 years in the minors before you get the call up to the Astros?
Yeah. So, I got drafted in 01. First round pick. Ignorance is bliss a little bit with that. You don't realize all the baggage to a degree that comes along with being a first round pick when you go into the minor leagues. There is definitely a stigma associated with that you have to kind of earn the respect of your teammates, because there's a lot of guys that got $1,000, and so,
Right.
and you
Yeah.
have coaches that back in that day, not anymore, but back in that day, you had guys that played. I'll leave his name out, but my first pitching coach in Double A, which my first full season they sent me to Double A, guy came up to me and said, "I played 9 years in the big leagues, and you made more money than me already." And I was like, okay, so sorry. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't, what do you,
Right.
what do you
Right.
want me to do? Like, but so you
Right.
had to kind of, deal with a little bit of that. Wasn't hard, but it just was interesting. I was like, wow, I didn't anticipate that. But again, fortunate to have the upbringing I had, which is just play your tail off and try to be a good teammate. And most of the rest of that stuff takes care of itself. So, first couple years in pro ball, had to one of the benefits of today's youth players is they play way more with wood bats now than we used to.
Right.
So getting
Mhm.
used to a wood bat was a much bigger adjustment in that day than it is today. And so first couple years had to do that, held my own, didn't do anything great. Then my third year, which was 2004 in Round Rock, or excuse me, in New Orleans AAA, I really took off and had a monster year. Got called up midway through that year. Um, and then, for the most part was in the big leagues, a good part of the next 6 seasons. And, what's interesting about being drafted 10th overall is usually you get drafted by an organization that's rebuilding. Ironically, the Astros had one losing year in a decade, and it happened to be in 2000 because Biggio got hurt. And so they traded off, I think maybe even Biggio and Bagwell got hurt. I can't remember, but they traded off a lot of their pieces down the stretch. They ended up having a bad year. So they picked 10th the next year. But they were immediately back in the playoffs. Like they were, and so it was a playoff organization. I mean, it was,
Right.
two cornerstone pieces in Bagwell and Biggio that were Hall of Fame players. So they were good every year. And so it was very odd to go that high and then, but also be drafted to a team that was trying to win. So a lot of the guys that I played in the Futures games in 2003 and 2004. Most of the guys I was playing with were on teams that were rebuilding. And so they immediately got to the
Right.
big leagues and played their primary position and played every day and were allowed to kind of grow up and uh, solidify themselves as everyday players. I had the benefit of being on a winner, but I was, kind of forced to fit in as a utility player. And
Right.
so, you could look at that two different ways. Um, and I could bore you with story after story about how interesting my run with the Astros was. What I will tell you is I was sharpened spiritually by two of the best Christian brothers that I've ever known in Lance Berkman and Andy Pettit. Those dudes put their arm around me and taught me what it looked like to walk with Jesus. But number two, I got to play in the World Series. And um, as much as I would like to change the outcome of what I like to say, the way my baseball card looks on the back, I will tell you that the uh, the knowledge, or I guess the experience is the word I'm looking for. The experience of having played in the College World Series and the Major League World Series is more than I could ever say thank you enough for. And so, whenever I get my feelings a little bit about the way things shook out for me in the big leagues, I always am reminded of being grateful and thankful for the experiences I had. And I'm a big believer in uh, the fact that God doesn't make mistakes, and you know the path that He had for me was one in which I'm very grateful for. And like I said, I could get my feelings and nitpick at this and nitpick at
That's
that,
right.
but uh, it was an awesome experience to be an Astro at that period of time. It really was. So many
For
people that
sure.
impacted my life, and um, to be able to play in those games and play for it all is an experience I'll never forget.
You always just have the 18th inning flashback, and then you're all
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
right?
that was.
Yeah. You did good. That's the biggest home
Mhm.
run that I've ever witnessed, and to have it, be a local guy, I was watching, so that was neat. But one other thing you got to do in '03 was play for the Team USA Olympic
Mhm.
qualifying team. Was that like a couple of days, or did that last a little bit to try to
Oh
make the
yeah,
Olympic team?
it was a entire fall journey. I was on the 2000 college team, and that was a blast. That was all summer long. Mark Pryor, Mark Teixeira, Bobby Crosby, Xavier Nady. We had an awesome team. Um, and then Ryan Howard. Ryan Howard didn't even start for us. That was crazy. But anyway, and in 2003, we were on the Olympic qualifier with the expectation that they told us this, like, we make the Olympics, everybody on that team that wasn't in the big leagues would be on the Olympic team. And Frank Robinson was our manager. Dave Stewart was our pitching coach. We had Joe Mauer was our catcher. Um, Matt Holliday played left field. Gabe Gross played right field. Grady Sizemore was in center. We had JJ Hardy at short. We were awesome. And we got beat 2-1 by Mexico and did not qualify for the Olympics.
Damn.
And
Wow.
it was, I could, again, you talk about boring you with details, but it was one of the worst defeats you could possibly imagine. We're on the cover of the USA Today. America doesn't qualify for the Olympics. It was a pretty devastating deal because not only do you feel terrible for your country, but you knew you missed an opportunity to play in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was a bump in the road for sure.
Right.
It happened down in Panama, so it was probably a little less. It didn't show up too much on the national sports scene. I remember
Right.
PTI talked about it, and I was like, "Oh, that's
Yeah.
not the way I wanted to get on PTI for the first time." But um, anyway, it's always a blast to put your country's name on the front of your chest, but that was certainly not the ending we were hoping for.
for that youth athlete that and the high school athlete, everybody's going to go through one of these losses, and it could be on their
Mm-hmm.
shoulders. There's been numerous now with social media. You see it all the time. Like, what would be your youth athlete little? I guess it'd be your history and your past. That what do they? How do they deal with it? Because as you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. People see it in high school. They lose a state championship game because they're pitching and the kid
Yeah,
hits a
yeah,
single,
yeah.
and it's on their shoulders. And the basketball, he misses the shot. Like, what's your advice for those guys? Obviously, to keep trekking, but I know you got some more insight.
Yeah, well, a couple of my favorite verses, scripture verses. James 1:2 says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kind, because the testing of your faith develops perseverance." In John 16:33, Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." And I think one of the greatest parts of youth sports, to me, that there's two things we should be focusing on in youth sports. Two things: problem solving and character development. Okay. Problem solving and character development. When we lose a big game or we fail in a big moment, you're forced to solve the problem of how do I pick up the pieces and move on. That's such a useful uh, lesson to be learned. I've won some big games as a coach and a player, and I've lost some big games as a coach and a player. And when I've had the opportunity to speak to a group of crying young men in a locker room as their coach, I said, never lose sight of what a blessing it is to play in a game that makes you cry when you lose it. What an honor it is to care so much about the group of men in this locker room and the moment that we just had, that the loss of it stings so bad that it makes you cry. Don't be embarrassed by that. Don't hang on to it too long. But I would much rather play in a game that brings that kind of emotion out of me after a loss than to sit on the sidelines and not participate in it. So congratulations on getting to a moment that matters so much, that you hurt this bad when you lose it. I wish you didn't hurt this bad as your coach, as somebody that loves you. I wish we'd have done a better job. I wish we'd have coached better, prepared better. But the reality is, if you play sports long enough, I told you I played in the College World Series and Major League World Series. We didn't win either one of them.
Right,
and
right.
and I can tell you, high school losses that still stick with me to this day and things like that. But I would just say you don't sign up to win. You also don't sign up to just play the position you want to play or for everything to go exactly the way you want it to go. And as parents and coaches, we got to do our best to try not to rob our kids of that experience of failure, because it really is. Again, if you can zoom out and say, what's this all about? Like, what's it all about? Man, problem solving and character development. And then you realize, well, man, losing and things not going my way is a very, very valuable piece of the journey. So I'm gonna get out of the way and not try to act like it didn't happen. But I also think that's why we should be careful to prop our kids up too much on social media, because I've had parents of kids that are middle schoolers say, "Man, the hate is real." I'm like, "What hate, dude? Your kid's in 7th
All
grade.
right.
Like, nobody hates your. Oh, have you seen the posts on social media?" I'm like, "Well, you posted it, like, and then so
Right.
somebody put some stupid, mean stuff underneath it, which is sad that somebody would post that about a kid. But like, if you wouldn't have posted in the first place, there would be no hate to read. You know what I'm saying? So we all have
Right.
to be careful of
Yep.
some of that. But I think it's very important. I tell my boys this all the time. Like, my two oldest boys play quarterback, and you're like, "Hey man, you're signing up for, if you lay an egg on Friday night, like Monday morning at school, don't be surprised if kids look at you sideways. Like, you're
Oh yeah.
signing up for that.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if you see bad social media posts. But by the way, you don't have to get on social media anyway. So like, you don't have to see those unless
Yeah.
you choose to. So
Right.
anyway, just making sure that we don't put kids in a situation where when they fail, and we make sure they realize when they fail, not if they fail, when they fail, that doesn't spook them. It's actually part of it. I tell my boys this all the time. You get into a pro locker room, especially in baseball where failure is so high. Most guys love to sit around and laugh and joke about their worst games. Like, dude,
Right.
I had a game one time where I struck out 4 times and on 12 pitches or whatever, and you're like, "Wait, you're in the big leagues." Like, "Yeah, man, it was." So, anyway, I think to a degree, if we handle it with the right lens, our biggest failures are our biggest opportunities for growth. And so we shouldn't fear that. We should embrace it and try to learn and help that shape our character and teach us maybe how to solve that problem better the next time.
In my youth coaching moment of the crying was you were actually on the
Yeah.
broadcast 2014, just starting out. This literally leads into my next segment of your broadcasting career, which I think is going to help some people as well on that part. But what a summer we had that was so fun, and appreciate you and Clay. Clay was on the call with you. Matt Vick was on the call with you, and man, he was
He's
a
awesome. Yeah.
character. And that's pretty much when I think I kind of met you in person, so to speak. And then you gave the boys, I think, a few lessons here or there, and from there, just obviously watched you do it on the broadcasting. And you've called one of Tucker's games. You were down at Vanderbilt last year on the call with him. He got to get in the game. It was pretty neat. But you started that in 2012, still do it today. I guess for the youth athlete, probably a college kid now or high school kid even. I know some of these athletes are turning into doing broadcasting. Like I know a baseball player at New Albany High School, he does the basketball games because we have a
Nice.
radio
Yeah.
station. He broadcasts the radio. So I guess my point back to the Cape Cod too. Tucker's been up there, and we've got fortunate to go up there and watch him. But they broadcast every game. These kids are in college. They come to the Cape all summer and all these other leagues to call the games and learn how to be a professional
Yeah.
broadcaster. And I guess that's a great way to stay in the game, just like you have. I'd like to hear your thoughts on
Well,
that.
I'm super grateful to do what I do. I feel like Dickie V a lot. Like they pay me for this, baby. I just can't. I can't believe it. Fortunate to have some relationships that I made as a player, and people say, "Hey, man, I think you do a nice job as a broadcaster." And so when I decided to retire, I retired at a pretty early age. I was just kind of discontent with how much I was bouncing around, and I played for 6 different teams my last 3 years, and Sarah and I were starting to raise a family, and I was like, yeah, okay, I think I'm done with that. And so I got into broadcasting, and I got in at the college level right before it got really big, right before the advent of the conference networks and where you could actually make a living as a college baseball analyst. So the timing of that has been terrific, and very grateful that that's the way it played out. But um, there's a lot of people don't realize this. I laugh with some of my buddies that I play with sometimes. There's 2 types of game announcers. There's the play-by-play guy, which I like to say they have real jobs. And then there's the analyst, which is almost always a former player or coach. And so uh, if you want to get into broadcasting and you want to do that as a career, most likely you're going to do that as a play-by-play guy, and that's where you see people go to, broadcast journalism schools, and Syracuse is probably the most famous one for that. And um, there's other programs, Ohio University, and places that help kids specialize. I'm just naming a couple, but I'm sure there are many others
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
they help kids specialize in broadcast journalism. For somebody like me, that was just a former player that had the gift of gab. There was no schooling. They literally threw me on TV, and it was like, let's see if this guy's good or not. And we've all listened to games of former players that you're like, that guy's pretty good. And you're like, that guy's not very good. And so I always laugh.
Mhm.
Like the first game I ever did, I didn't even bring a scorebook. And I was doing Miami and Florida State was the first game I ever did. And the guy that was doing play by play, his name was Tom Block. The guy I was doing play by play with goes, "Do you have a scorebook?" And I looked at him like, "No. Do I need one?" And he was like, "Well, how are you going to know the players' names?" And I was like, "Well, I memorized them." And he goes, He goes, what about when they sub? And I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, literally, I had no clue what I
Yeah.
was doing. So, uh, I did okay. And I got 2 games. And the next game, I brought a scorebook. He gave me a page of his, and I learned how to put a lineup on a piece of paper and score the game. And I just look back at it and laugh. But from there, I started to do a little bit more. And 2014 was my big break where Kyle Peterson and Dave Neal let me join them for 3-man booth, and we did the Thursday night SEC game of the week, and that was a big deal. And then 2015, the SEC Network launched, and that changed really
Yep.
broadcasting forever. And all of a sudden, college baseball was uh, much more exposed on a weekly basis, and of course, it's grown into the ACC Network. And basically now you can see every college baseball game on
Oh
some
yeah.
form, some platform, somewhere. And so the game is very much exploded. And like I said, very grateful and fortunate to get in there on the front end of that. And now I get to live out my dream, which is calling the College World Series every year, and that's certainly something I don't take for granted. It is an awesome event, and if you love the sport of baseball, put that on your bucket list because it is worth getting to.
Absolutely. And we watch all the local athletes that are on the ESPN app. You can get any
Any game,
game. You can get every
that's
sport
right.
almost. I mean, we're watching the boys, the girls from these high schools going into college. It's
Yeah.
pretty cool just to sit at your home and watch them in
Hmm.
another state, just on
And
the
that's how
app.
you
So
learn. I
that's
mean, as a
really neat.
broadcaster, that's how you learn is reps. I feel guilty saying it because again, the world was so different then. I got my reps live on TV. But
Yeah,
now you can do all these digital games and kind of learn your craft and find your niche.
it's awesome. My last segment is the most important job I think you have right now is a U Sports parent, and you are
Hmm.
coaching. I know that. So I know it's rewarding to you. I know you just won a sixth grade state championship with the basketball team, and I'm pretty sure you love watching your kids play their sports that they're in. Um, your advice to parents that are having the 10-year-old to even to 16-year-old, 17-year-old playing high school, advice for them navigating, like we talked about, the crazy world with the showcases and the social media, just all that intertwine into a kid still wanting to play a game that they
Mm.
love. I guess what's your
Yeah,
advice
it's hard.
to the parents
It's
and the
very hard.
athletes?
I don't have all the answers. I said it earlier. Like I try to make it about problem solving and character development best I can. We talk about those two things a lot. And you know, to me, the fight and the compete factor of sports are the things that can really carry kids forward. So the teams I coach, those are always big talking points. As a parent, for especially my older 2 boys that are um, talented kids that want to play in college. One's in ninth grade, one's in sixth grade. So the sixth grader still got a long way to go. But the ninth grader, you're in high school now. And I've always said, like, if your kid is talented at sports, and let them get on a varsity field and see where they stack up. And once you see that based on how old they are when that happens, I think that helps you navigate how much money and time you should be spending trying to get that kid seen to play at college. Like if, if the kid shows promise at a young age, then, you keep facilitating that and giving them opportunities. But you don't, it's similar to grade school, middle school grades. Like that's awesome that they're really smart and getting good grades.
Right.
But really, where that matters the most is when they're in high school and then they start taking their placement tests or whatever, the ACT, SAT, and then you kind of figure out, oh, they're like really smart. They got a 34 or 32, or you're like, oh, their test scores aren't great, but maybe I can get them into. We can help them with this, and we can increase that. It's similar in sports. It's like, okay, they get in high school and they're a really good high school player, and now they're on a varsity team, and you're like, oh, my kid hits third, or my kid's striking out. He's a sophomore and he's one of the top 2 in their rotation. Oh, well, this kid might
Mhm.
be, you might have a chance to play in college, and then you start to put the gas pedal down, I think, in the development and the exposure and seeking that next level of competition. Um, but we've tried hard to stair step that and not get too far ahead of ourselves. Again, I don't have all the answers, and I'm very empathetic to parents because it's a feels like a very
It's tough.
complicated process. Uh,
It's tough. I was in same thing you did. We didn't do the 5th and 6th grade showcase for
mhm,
$350. You wait till you see how they
mhm.
stack up, and then you try one of those and get them on the map, so to speak, of their respective sport. And then
Yeah,
you're off and running and see what
I
happens.
would
So,
say the one thing I've
but it
learned from being around all these college coaches is, exposure's great. There's different forms of that. That word is very much overused, but for the most part, coaches are looking for traits. And regardless of your travel ball jersey, if your kid has those traits, the coach is going to be interested in them. If he doesn't, he probably isn't. And the good news is there's a lot of schools and a lot of coaches that are looking for a lot of different things. But at the highest end of the food chain, the traits the guys are looking for aren't that hard to figure out. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're trying to play at Louisville and you're a center fielder, like, you better fly. I mean, it's just that's not a secret, right? If you
right,
don't, you're
right.
probably not going to go to Louisville. So no matter how much money and time you invest in hitting lessons, if your kid plays center field and he doesn't fly, don't be surprised if Louisville doesn't offer it. And I could go on and on about different positions and different traits, but like, that's probably the simplest example I can give of just trying to be honest. I mean, we all have daddy goggles. I can certainly be guilty of it, but there are certain things you just can't ignore if you're trying to be a
Right.
unbiased helper of your kid. I mean, none of us are unbiased, but as realistic, maybe I should say, as you can. And so if your kid runs a 7.460 and he plays center field, like, you just need to tell him, like, hey bro, you either get in that 6.7, 6.8 range, or like, you're not playing Division I center field.
Right,
I hate
right.
to say it that simple. Again, you might go to a small school, rake, get faster, stronger, and then play there, but you're not going to do it out of high school.
Also, for the parents, they say, the crazy parent, they don't, coach doesn't recruit the kids. I don't know what happened. That bypassed me because I was a crazy parent and coach, and somehow they got fortunate enough to get some
Your
college
kids were good
scholarships.
enough.
But
They overlooked you.
yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. I
Yeah.
could be crazy, I guess. But that part of it, like you're saying, just the mom, putting on Instagram or Twitter, or whatever, the kid doing it, like all that stuff. Just if they would calm it down, I think that's going to help them be a better person. Obviously, athletics can make you a better person. So
Well, again, I don't
uh,
want to get
I
in the
want to thank
judgment
you.
piece of parents, that if they're proud of their kids, I get it. But you're right. There is a piece there where, coaches are evaluating, a lot of different elements of a prospective student athlete. And one of those is their social media presence or their parents' activity at a game or the way they interact with them on the phone. Like, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think as a parent, we all want to help. And so I think it's a
Yep.
helpful self-reflection. Am I helping my kid? Like, and I have to, and fortunately I have a wife that holds me accountable to that. Like, when you were in his nose in the timeout, like, do you think he was listening to you, or like, you think he was just like hearing noise? I'm like, well, that's a helpful point. Let me reflect on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Guilty.
I feel like you helped some parents and coaches out there, and hopefully some of the high school athletes will listen to you. And I think they gained some
Well, good.
knowledge today,
I
and I
hope so.
appreciate you being on my first ever youth sports podcast. And
Good luck with this, man.
thank you
Appreciate it.
again. Good luck. And
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's my plan, to have some fun with it, but educate maybe some of these parents and youth coaches and little
Yeah,
athletes
for
out
sure.
there. So I appreciate
You
your
got it,
time,
bro.
Chris. All right. We'll see you.